This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. Thompson, and you're listening to Arn. It's Tuesday. You know what that means. And we couldn't be here without the one and only founder of the Four Horsemen, the Hall of Famer himself, Double A, the enforcer, Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
Fantastic questions. You got some questions for me today?
Dude, I got so many. We had like 400 replies on Twitter. There's no way we'll get to them all. Fans are really digging getting to pick your brain. We should mention, by the way, that they're actually getting a chance to do that over at adfreeshows.com. Even though last week when I asked, you absolutely shut it down. Mrs. Anderson is going to do some questions on adfreeshows.com. How in the world did you sell this?
Well, number one, she will tell you quickly she's never been Mrs. Anderson. and I've never been Arn. Those words have never came out of her mouth, which she will point out if you ask her.
You know, it's funny because one of the first times I had the pleasure of hanging out with her, I think it was like a WrestleMania weekend, maybe in Dallas. And I just happened to be bellied up to the bar, and she came over and said, "Oh my gosh, Conrad," and sat down, and we started talking and in conversation. And of course I'd met her before, and she's great and gracious, and we had a good time. But every now and again she would say Marty, and I'm thinking, who the hell is she talking about? Like I'm in total wrestling mode. It's WrestleMania weekend. And I'm thinking, surely to God, Mrs. Lunde's not friends with Janetti. Like who is she talking? Skrull? No, she wouldn't know who that. Who in the world is that? And then it clicks like, oh shit, that's her actual husband's name. I've just known him as Arn my whole life.
Yeah. And everyone that knew me when I wrestled, we had this, discussion here a while back. Everyone that knew me when I was a wrestler, they're stuck. I don't care if they're our neighbors. They're stuck on Arn because hey, I cash my check at the bank as Arn Anderson. That's the way it was, Conrad. I flew as Arn Anderson. I had no ID other than I had frequent flyer cards in Arn Anderson's name. That was a real person. Once 9/11 came along and all that, everything changed and all that, probably even before that. But for a period, you could go and cash your check at the bank under your wrestling name. Different times, different regulations.
Let's, man, it's so, we could talk about that all day. It's fascinating to me that this is such a weird subculture. Like there's no way Michael Keaton never cashed a check made out to Batman. You know what I mean? Like, but for some reason, like no one would even approach, Val Kilmer on the street and say, "Oh, look, it's Batman." Nobody, that's not a thing. But somehow in wrestling, we want to believe that you wake up and go to bed as Arn Anderson. And, part of that is you used to convince us, being a horseman isn't something you put on in the morning and take off at night. We just assume, oh no, these are fucking real life guys. And then one day you meet the real life Ric Flair and you realize, well, that's not exactly like Ric Flair, but pretty close. And then you read Arn Anderson, or so you think, and he's not exactly Marty Lunde. It's just weird to me that this only exists in wrestling.
Well, let me calm your nerves here a minute. From the moment I was knighted Arn Anderson, I was never Marty Lunde again through my wrestling career. It was only after I became an agent and, had a different job and things were the way they were, that I, just accepted, hey, you're Marty Lunde, you're Martin Lunde. That's it. You're not Arn Anderson anymore. And there were people that, would come up and go, and I would catch myself saying this, and I wasn't trying to be mean or be a smart ass. I really, really wasn't. People would come up and say, hey, you're Arn Anderson, aren't you? And I would say, I used to be. And when you think about that, that's almost kind of sad, but that's just the way I felt at the time when the wrestler Arn Anderson, the performer Arn Anderson was no longer able to do any of that, then I probably shouldn't even be that guy or pretend to be that guy anymore.
Oh man, let's try to pull the nose up a little bit. Let's do some questions here on Ask Arn Anything.
Let me stop you.
Okay.
Before we go downhill, and it wasn't meant to go downhill, can you imagine the lady sitting up at the bank window? Guy pulls in, his head sticking through the moonroof, and he hands you a check with one man gang on it. Now, if you cash that check, I'm going to check your competency as working at the bank.
Well, in fairness, if his head is sticking through the sunroof, you might just look at him and say, checks out.
Mr. Gang, thank you. Have a good day.
Mr.
Here's
Gang.
a wad of cash.
That's tremendous. Mr. Gang. John wants to know, what'd you think of the match you had with Macho Man on Saturday night in 95 for the TV title? I thought it was a very good match.
I agree. I was, a little starstruck working with Randy. Randy was a big star. And, I was never lost on the fact that the guys I was in the ring with, some of them, a lot of them were big stars in the industry and the biggest. And I was fortunate enough to go out and have some time and wrestle a guy like Randy Savage, in a world television title match, I think it was.
Yeah.
He won. I think that was the first time I wrestled was for the title. I may be mistaken about that, but just being in the ring with that guy was, it was challenging, and it was exciting and flattering and fun, all wrapped up in one.
Ken Patera's pet raccoon Josh wants to know, how did Arn like having Jimmy Hart as his manager in WCW for a short period when the Horsemen and the Dungeons sort of teamed up together?
Jimmy's a high energy guy. Jimmy's a guy that you want to have on your team as far as, always bringing that energy and always having a positive attitude about everything that goes down. And he was just one of those guys that you could ask Jimmy to literally do anything, and he would be more than willing. He's really one of those upbeat guys that you just want to have him on your team. He's the greatest utility guy probably ever. Doesn't matter what you ask him to do. He will get it done if he can't do it himself. So, he wasn't really our manager, but I guess he was part of that grouping for that particular storyline. And, I was glad to have Jimmy around.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.